You're listening to the Staging Sips podcast with Lori Fisher. This podcast is dedicated to helping real estate staging CEOs build healthy businesses that grow, flow, and thrive. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to be here today, and more so than most weeks. You know, I say that every week, but this week I am really excited because I have a guest / friend / one of my coaches, Stacy Rowan, with us today of Custom Built Life. And we are going to be talking all about why all business advice isn't equal, and through the lens of something called human design. And human design is something that I discovered several years ago and started kind of diving into. It's almost like the ultimate personality test, I thought anyway. And I know Stacy will describe it even deeper than that. But I really found it very fascinating and learned about Stacy and the work that she was doing in terms of helping business owners tap into and apply human design concepts and understand our human design and how it plays out in our businesses. And I wanted to coach with her on it for two reasons. And I always tell her this in full transparency. I wanted to see, one, if it was BS and I could stop wasting my time learning it. And two, if it actually was legit and a thing, what could I do to maximize my business? And so I learned that it was the second one. I could maximize my business because it really is legit. And the podcast actually really arose, and the urge and the need to do it and the want and desire to do it really came from the work that I was doing with Stacy. So all of that said, hello, Stacy.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. You know very well, this is my favorite topic, of any topics to discuss. So, I'm really excited to share with your audience and, just talk all things human design.
Perfect. So today what we're going to do is we're going to get a little background on human design, but for all those of us in our staging businesses, how we can use it and start delving into it and applying it to our own businesses. So to start us off, Stacy, can you just tell us about a bit more about human design and its evolution and your path to it?
So I actually loved your description. It was the best personality typing system there is, because it could be compared to a Myers-Briggs or a StrengthsFinder or an Enneagram. It's in that class of systems, at least in terms of how it's used, right? And it is a system of self-awareness so that we can understand ourselves and how we're supposed to interact in the world. And the great thing about human design and business is that it really tells us how the other people are experiencing us. And, why sometimes we have misunderstandings, or people are, kind of giving us a weird look, what's going on with you? Normally that's because we're not in alignment with our design. So you can think of design as nonverbal communication. It's the energy you carry with you, whether you're aware of it or not. That gets communicated to the people that you interact with. So some people may follow traditional human design. It's just application to your life, which is, can be used for raising your consciousness and enlightenment and things like that. Applied to business, it is really to smooth your relationships. It is to smooth your communication. And it is to be able to show up and work in the easiest way with other people, because most people, even if they're a solopreneur, you're working with someone, you're working with clients, maybe you're working with contractors. So when we learn about our human design and apply it in our business, everything seems to just run a little smoother. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to say, and I will just tell your audience right now, I'm going to say that's one of the things I love about human design. And I will probably use that phrase 50 times in our time together, because there's so many things I love about it. So I try to break myself of that habit, but I haven't been successful yet.
All good. No, I know. And it's so fascinating. And as you were talking, it was really making me think about the work that you and I have been doing is really about the marketing of my business more than anything else. But I had just done a podcast, episode 19, about how to love up on your team. And it was all about team. and how you can use the love languages to understand your team and how to reward them and love up on them. But we could also, I mean, this is so helpful with client interfaces. As stagers, we're going into client situations all the time. We're dealing with realtors. We're dealing with a lot of personalities. So that idea of energy and nonverbal communication, why you just click with some people better, I think is super powerful to understand, or how to get how to get yourself in alignment in relationship to somebody else, because that's, another huge part of it. So I guess my one quick question is, because we talk about that it is the ultimate personality test, I think it would be important for people to know where they can actually find out what their human design chart is. Like, what's that look like? And then once they have their chart, I know when I first did that, I looked at it and I was like, I have no idea what the hell any of this means. So maybe we can break down some of the components of what they might find if they do that.
So there's a lot of places online where you can print a free chart. Because again, I'm focused on career and business, I am, doing my certifications and all through the BG5, stands for Base Group 5, BG5 Institute. So bg5institute.com. And you will see there's a tab that says reports, I believe is what it says. And you can print a free chart or a free short report. It will cost you nothing. When you go to do that, you need to know your birth time. Human design is based in part on astrology. So having your accurate birth time is important. Not everybody has their birth time. If you don't have it on your legal birth certificate, sometimes it can be found in a baby book or on a hospital birth certificate. Like if the hospital gave your parents a little certificate when you left the hospital, sometimes you can ask a relative. There tends to be in a lot of families, one relative who just remembers everything. If you really can't narrow it down, even to a time of day, because things can change in a minute or they can be pretty similar throughout the day and you don't know until you run the chart. But someone who's trained in human design can run multiple charts for you and, through conversation, probably say if there's a big change, which chart is more right for you. And there are ways to do it if you can approach it that way, but we won't go into that now. But just know that when you go to that free site, you will need your birth date, birth time, and birth location. And then you just put that in, free chart pops out. If you get the free short report from the BG5 Institute, it will give you some words along with this funky picture, which if you just get the picture, you're going to be like, what do I do with this?
Yep, absolutely. True facts.
There is a lot of information available because the interest in human design has just been exploding. And so there's a lot of information that you can find, on social media, on the internet. The places that you're going to want to start is type and decision making. And so when you learn about your type, there's 4 types, although one of the types, they tend to split into 2 subtypes. So in traditional language, which is the more common language that you're going to find in social media and online, we have generators. Right, generators. I can't do it. I keep thinking I work in the corporate or the business language. So let me go there first, yes, and then I'll translate. Advisors, which are projectors in traditional language. Builders, which are generators. Initiators, which are manifestors. And evaluators, which are reflectors. It's easier to go in that direction.
Yep. No, that's great.
So you want to learn about your type because your type explains to you really how other people experience your energy. And so the energy of, say, a generator to a manifestor is very different. And then the second thing you want to look at is decision-making strategy. Most of us make decisions from our brain, and that is not actually the best way to make our decisions. So you're going to have a little statement that talks to you about your decision-making strategy. And it might say, follow the gut, or it might say wait for emotional clarity and follow the gut, or it might say wait for recognition and invitation and then talk it through. So there's going to be a little phrase that's going to tell you a little bit about your decision-making strategy. And again, most of the time you can find information, basic information online to get you started. The wonderful thing with human design is there are many, 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 many layers. It is the most precise and deepest typing system I've ever come across. So the amount of information you can find out about yourself is amazing.
Yes.
And it all kind of stacks on each other to come back to type and decision making. And so if you understand how the energy of your type works and you understand your decision making, even with that, you can get into alignment and living with your design.
Yes, absolutely. And so for me, I'm a manifesting generator.
Yes.
And my decision making is emotional. I always want to say sacral, but I am emotional. So I have to ride the wave because I am excited about everything in the moment and want to say yes in the moment all the time. But I need to give it time to like really contemplate and think about that. Right. So that's what we've been working on with in my chart, just to bring it like super tangibly down to, one example. We can use me as the example throughout, which is totally fine. And I am, best when people ask me yes and no for me to respond to in order to decide if I like, if I want to move forward with something or not. And my body gives me clear signals in terms of a yes. And I'm learning what my no is. I still haven't quite uncovered that, but we're in the process of learning that. So that's like you said, that's like the very top layer for me anyway, when it comes to this. So just to kind of put that in some tangible kind of for people. So this was interesting because what came up in our sessions relating to me and business advice and marketing was that people really need to hear my voice, but they also need to be introduced to me or brought into my world by people that I already know. And one of the things that you and I had discussed was the fact that I always found it interesting that I would go and present to a real estate office and that I might have gotten in the door because of somebody I knew, but they might not have been at the presentation. And I never ended up booking business out of that. And I thought, that's so strange because I think I present well. I think I, know my topic and I come across as expert, but I wasn't booking business. It was only when I was in the presence of somebody that I knew in those situations when I would actually onboard new clients. And you had said, well, of course, you looked at my chart and it's right there, right? And
I love when you look at the chart and it's right there. It's like, of course.
Yeah. And it was so validating because, and this I think is something interesting for people to know when you start diving into this, it was validating because like I said, I had observed it and I had noticed it and I really was confused by it. And didn't really know what to do about it, but thought, okay, well, the advice is to go to presentations at offices or libraries or whatever. But in reality, that wasn't the best way for me. And then I don't know that we looked into my assistant's chart who can literally get anybody to buy from us anytime. And her chart has to be different because she can take somebody totally cold and they're buying from us. So we just put her in charge of sales, by the way.
Good choice. Good choice.
So anyway, I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So I'd love to hear what are some of the business advice that people get that doesn't work depending on what your personality type is.
So we'll start with the example you gave. So for you, it comes down to an aspect of your design called public role. And within your public role, you have two parts to your public role. For you, part of it is an influencer. And what that means is that within a community of people that you are very influential. You have a natural, warm, and inviting personality, right? People enjoy spending time with you. They want to be part of your community. And then once they are part of your community, you have influence within that community. And even when you're working with people, even in our introduction, we knew each other before you worked with me. And that's very normal for your, for your public role as well, because you like to work with people and that you like, and so it's know, like, and trust, but there needs to be a little bit more normally if someone's an influencer to almost feel like there's this established relationship or even friendship to work with them. Even when you're not working with people within your community, the opportunities are typically coming through your community. Mm-hmm. Now, that's just one type of public role. There's a different type of public role that works best. And this is, I think we were theorizing this for your assistant as a stranger, what we call a stranger of consequence. So like for that person, having a community, it's not going to be detrimental to them, that still has people know them, but it's going to work in a different manner. So first of all, they may go, I always use the grocery store as an example. They may go in the grocery store, be standing in line, checking out, and start a conversation with someone and create a client right there. Just from that conversation with a complete stranger. A lot of times, whatever wisdom that they're meant to offer the world is more valued by people who know them less well. The people closest to them, it's like they're almost too close to see their brilliance. Mm-hmm. And so they tend to work with people who start out with strangers. They don't feel the need to be friends or to have that relationship first. So how their community is going to work for that type of public role, which is called a messenger, is that they may get referrals from their community, but then not really know the person, so it's like maybe a client worked with them and then told someone else, oh, you need to work with them. Now the second person is more of a stranger. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine, there's a lot of advice about networking and building communities and being known in the communities and all these things. But the actual nuanced way that you're going to do that, or the way your community is best going to serve you, is going to be really different if you're an influencer or you're a messenger. For you, you said going into these real estate offices where you didn't know anyone, it's like you were confused, but it didn't seem to hit you too hard in like the self-confidence, right? You were able to be like, well, I know I present well and I have enough success that I can lean on this, but particularly someone starting out in business, what could happen is, some expert somewhere says, okay, go make presentations in these places where you'll find your clients. And it sounds like excellent advice. But if they're going into places cold and they're an influencer and none of those people are buying, what can happen is that person who's new in business might think like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. I'm doing this wrong. Or I just must not be cut out to have a business. And they may quit and give up. And in reality, it's just that they're not working in alignment with who they naturally are. They're letting someone else be the expert over them. And a lot of times it's like they'll have some sense in them, in their body of like, just really resistant. I don't want to do this. And that can show up if our mindset is off, but it can also be an indication of, oh, I'm not in alignment with my design. But most of us have been trained to listen to experts and not to listen to ourselves. So that's what we do.
Yeah.
And what happens is you end up, had you not figured this out, had you not had this information, you might have just been doubling down on, okay, well, I don't get many clients from this route, so I'm going to do twice as many or 3 times as many. And then you end up expending all of this energy in a way that isn't natural for you. And it can really exhaust you and wear you out.
Yes. Yeah. And I always felt like, oh, the problem is theirs too, by the way. Just so
I love that.
So let's take that networking advice. Okay. So as me as an influencer, I obviously work through my community, and then my assistant Lisa as a messenger can make strangers just buy anything from her. It's like she's a magical unicorn. What are the other personality types, like what would be an avenue? Because I'd love for people to just even get an awareness, kind of like what I had, which was a little bit of awareness and then an epiphany, like, oh, that's why BNI was an effective tool for me, because I was creating a warm audience, giving me warm introductions, versus the going to give presentations. So I'm just curious for the other types.
Public role show there's 6 different categories within public role, and then they can arrange themselves in a few different combinations, because you get 2 of these words, so they can, it's the combination of them. But I'll just walk through the 6 different things.
Okay.
So if you have, and so your public role, if you printed your chart and you're looking at it, your public role will present as a number or as these phrases that I'm going to give you. So, for instance, your public role, as I remember right, the numbers, you're a 4-1, I think, right?
Yep.
So you are an influencer authority.
Yes.
I don't have your chart in front of me, so I'm going, am I right?
Great.
Yes,
yeah,
I'm
you
right.
got it.
So we'll start with the 1. The authority is someone who likes to learn and research and, kind of likes to have time maybe to themselves to dig deep into a subject. I happen to be an authority as part of my public role. And so the example that I like to give is there are some people who will come to human design and they'll be just happy learning about a little bit of their design. Like they just want to know their type, how they make decisions, and they never need to know anything else. And they certainly don't care to know anything else about anyone else. When I came to human design, I wanted to know all the things about all the things. I wanted to know, of course, every detail about my design, but I also wanted to know the whole system and how it worked and how everybody fit in and how all the pieces came together. I started learning about design 5 years ago. And instead of my list of things I want to learn about it getting shorter, I swear it's just getting longer. And that's kind of the perfect, stereotype of an authority. They need a solid foundation in whatever they're working in so that they can feel secure. It also comes with a bit of modesty, because it can be like, you always have that feeling of wanting to know more. Like, oh, maybe I should know a little more. Maybe I'm not quite ready yet. So for someone who's new in business, if they're an authority, they can find that they spend a lot of time prepping because, I'm making this presentation, but maybe I should go through it one more time. Well, maybe I should I should learn a little bit more and come to it. And they might have a hard time, like kind of getting off the ground and doing things because of that, not like built-in insecurity that comes with it.
Like a lot of us talk about imposter syndrome. So
Yes.
like if you have a 1 in this area of public role, you're probably going to feel that pretty hard and maybe for a long time.
Yeah, you absolutely could. And so part of it is the way that I tend to work with my clients with design is through the lens of awareness. When you know that, right, then you can decide from having that knowledge about yourself. It's like, oh, I see this part of my design working and man, it's working hard.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to slow down or do I not? And then when you know how to make your decisions, you listen to your decision-making strategy. Whether your decision-making strategy says, do you have enough information to proceed? Or do you still need more? It kind of takes the guesswork out.
Okay, that's great.
Moving to number 2. Number 2 is the natural. And it's all about like the natural talent or natural potential the person has. So really what got me started thinking in this terms of business advice that doesn't work is I was listening to a presentation someone was giving to entrepreneurs. And I can't even remember exactly what they were talking about, but it was a great presentation and there was a lot of strategy and skills. And I was like, yes, this is amazing. And we were rolling with it. And I was like, this is so fabulous. And then they gave the piece of advice that said, so if you're starting out new in business, like do the thing that you're really good at. Do the thing that other people tell you is really valuable that you do and that you're really good at. And it was like someone put the brakes on for me. Like I had been rolling along, riding their wave and brakes on. because that's really great advice for the natural, right? The natural is someone who has this natural talents and potential, but they may not recognize it themselves. It's something that comes so easy to them that they tend to discredit it. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's nothing, right? Imagine someone who can throw the most magnificent parties and, you're so thankful when you get invited and you're like, thank you so much. This is fabulous. You throw the best parties. And they're like, oh, it's nothing. And they're not just putting on airs. They actually mean like, oh no, like it's so simple. And you're like, you should be a party planner. And they're like, no, anybody can do this. No.
Yeah.
That person's probably a natural.
So, and I'm curious about, like, as you're talking about that, one of the things that sometimes in our industry, people tend to undervalue how impactful and important what we do as stagers is. Like we undercharge, and often we hear because it just seems so easy, right? Like, so they're not really charging what it's actually worth. So I wonder how many of those people who have that kind of approach are a natural, a number two in their line. That's kind of interesting.
You could imagine that maybe people get into staging, like, because they just have a love of like, design and their home is always beautiful and well put together. And then a friend is like, oh, you should do this. And, like, they're like, well, I don't know, so it's like they start with the staging because it's like they're undervaluing them. And so rather than maybe stepping into like interior design or something, they might be like, oh, I'll step into this. It feels, less intimidating or something. So it could be,
yep.
Like I could see that being one path of entry into the industry. And those people could very much be naturals. They could come other ways too, but yes. Now, the reason that I hit the brakes with the naturals is because the next type, the number 3, is a pioneer. Pioneer is cutting edge, loves new things, learns by trial and error. So they have some things that work out and some things that don't. And depending on what other number they kind of match up with, they can have more error depending on, what their other part of their public role is. So here I'm hearing this like, oh, just do what you love, do what comes easy to you. And I'm like, oh, but the pioneers who are learning from trial and error, it may never feel easy because they're designed to learn by trying something out, knowing that sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. That's going to be part of their life forever. If they're just looking for the easy thing, they may be like, well, nothing's easy. I have no natural talents. Right. So with our pioneers, I have another friend in human design, and she says, it's not about winning and losing. It's about winning and learning. Mm-hmm. The failures are so you learn.
Yes.
Right. Like you just have to learn by it either works or it doesn't. And there has to be a lot of grace in that for yourself. Mm-hmm. And the mindset to go along with it. So if a pioneer was raised by a perfectionist, there's going to be some mindset work that needs to happen there.
Yeah.
The 4 is the influencer, which we already talked about. That's the person who is great in communities, very influential in communities, normally has all the friends. And sometimes they can be great at building communities. Sometimes they may not build the community themselves, but they may just be active in communities that other people have brought together, depending on some other things happening in their design. The 5 is the messenger. That's the stranger of consequence. That is really the problem solver. The messenger is meant to step in, fix problems, and step out. And most people are going to look at them and expect them to be able to solve their problem. The thing that someone who has a public role of messenger needs to understand is that just because someone else assumes that you can fix the problem, they're not always right. And so you need to listen to the decision-making strategy to say, is this the problem I'm meant to fix? Because if you say you can fix it and then you cannot and you failed them, that person may very well go out and trash your reputation. So you have to watch and you have to understand that what everybody sees in you is not necessarily truth.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. That's fascinating.
And then the last one, the 6, is the leader or the role model. Now, I don't want people to think if they're a 3-1, they can't be a leader. That's not true. It's just like, what form does your leadership take? So the 6, their leadership takes the form of a role model, because of the first 30 years of their life, they operate like the pioneer, all that trial and error. But then they go through a phase where they are more introspective and they sort through all of their experiences. And so that by the time they reach 50, they've made sense of what all the things that worked and all the things that didn't work. They found common lessons that they can share with the rest of the world. And that's when they become the role model. So they're normally leading through their own experiences.
Gotcha.
Right? Been there, did it, didn't work out. You don't have to. I will save you the effort. I've already done it.
I've already done it. Yes. Well, I think I was at a dinner party with somebody once, not long ago, and they were describing their life's trajectory, which was exactly that 6 line that you said. And so I said, would you mind if we did this thing? It's called human design. I am so curious, because you are like textbook for this 6, where you trialed and errored. And then she was telling me how she did, catering, and she did set design, and she was an art student. She painted murals for a period of time. And then she was on mission work, and she did all this stuff in like her early 20s and 30s. And then she is now in her 50s, and she's teaching at a community college that is like this multimedia kind of program. And she's like, it just takes everything that I had learned and all these weird, random, disparate experiences. And she's like, it's a combination of all of them. And she's like, it's my most joy I've had in my career ever in my life. And I was like, and we ran her chart, and sure enough, she was a 6 line. And there she was, and was it a projector? There's like some other element. I don't know. I guess it was the 6. It was the hermit part in traditional human design.
The hermit. So the hermit is the 2.
The hermit,
yeah. I believe.
Yeah, the 2-6. That's what she was.
So she was a natural. So she was like probably a natural at all these things, and like maybe she didn't even value them until other people were like, "Oh my gosh, you really have to pay attention. This is so valuable." And then she brought it all together through her
fascinating. Yeah. So anyway, that's just a little anecdote on like when you start learning some of this stuff, how you can begin to like go,
it is endlessly entertaining to interact with people and to try to guess what their design is from how they, the experiences they've had, the things they, talk about, how they interact with people. And what I find for most people so when I start with people, it's always about learning your own design first, right? So we work together and we're really focusing on you getting to know you. And then you can go on and be like, well, how do I best work with my team? And how do I, dive deeper into how to work in my business? But it starts with you knowing you. When you have that deep understanding and self-awareness, and it tends to lead to acceptance, because things come up that you've been fighting against your whole life. And when you recognize like, oh, this is meant to be part of me, and maybe I'm not using it in the most resourceful way, but it is me. And I've been trying to change this. It's not going to change, right? You find the acceptance for it. Or things you've secretly hoped are you, but you've kind of been hiding away because maybe you were just thinking a little too highly of yourself. And then you're like, oh my gosh, no, that is actually in my design. And you bring that forward. Almost all of my clients, it's like I can see it happening, as we get later on in our progression, this relaxation, because they're releasing judgment on themselves. Yeah. They're not bashing themselves. They're not like blaming themselves if something isn't working. They're first seeking to understand through design, well, why isn't this working? Rather than, I must be an utter abject failure. So they have that self-trust and release the self-judgment. And then they're able to show up for other people. And instead of being like, I don't like how this person is, they're thinking, oh, I wonder what their design is.
Mm-hmm.
What makes them this way?
Yeah.
Why are they this way? Like there are people when we talk about different themes that show up in our design, there can be the theme of being really close and, really loyal to your immediate community, like your family and your friends, right? And there can be people that have a lot of that theme in their design. And then there are people who can have a lot of the theme of independence and individualism. And so someone who is all about the family might view the individual as like, what is wrong with them? They never want to connect. They are always off by themselves. They don't think of other people. But when you go through design, it's like, oh, I wonder if they have a lot of individual themes in their design.
Yeah.
It's like we can offer more grace and suspend the judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as we think about, applying it to business too, like you and I have talked about that I have like a lot in both of those areas of, community as well as individualism. And one of the things that we had talked about was how my team will tell me, and especially my senior stager, Lisa, will say, you need to come up for air and say hello to us. Like you've got to connect with us as a team, because there are times where I will just hermit in, especially if we're thinking about new ways to do things or we're thinking about new services to come to fruition. Like I love to sit and like ruminate and think and tinker and create the system and create the scaffold, because I'm a one and I want to research it and make sure we've got the right structure and foundation. And I'm leaning into that individualism. And then it's so helpful. And she and I have talked about that. I'm like, that is important for me, for you to tap me on the shoulder, because I can be doing a deep dive and forgetting, oh, hey,
I have a team. They would like to talk to me once in a while.
Every once in a while. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's been so fascinating. And what I love about how you and I have worked together is that you also are a certified life coach. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is what you had said was we're looking at our design, but then there's all kinds of patterns and behaviors that we have learned that are incongruous with our design. We were talking recently about relationships and me inserting myself in the equations of other relationships. And I loved that, because it was like, no, I'm not supposed to be in there. That's their equation. Let them deal with it. And it's not an alignment for me to be there. And we did a lot of we were doing mindset work about all of that. So I love that you take both of those and you're merging those together, because, as you said, like it's, and I say that like our knowledge, beliefs, and actions create our results. And I think human design and the way you work with us hits every single one of those areas. And it's such a deeper level of understanding and awareness of ourselves, first of all. So I think, anybody who's considering diving into human design deeper, but is also wanting the mindset coaching work layered in, perfect. Amazing.
Well, thank you. And, for me, I started out with the life coaching. So I started out with all the mindset work and everything. And then human design came in later when I found it. And it's funny because I'm also a one. So I started out coaching and my clients were very satisfied, but I felt like something was missing. And I was like, I'm looking for a foundation or a scaffolding, something that can influence my coaching. And when I found human design, I knew that that's what I had been looking for and waiting for. My clients didn't feel I needed it, but it felt important to me. And there are a lot of people out there and based on their design, it can be correct for them, but there's a lot of people out there who offer like a human design reading and you just spend a couple hours with them, or maybe they do a couple sessions, 2 or 3 sessions, and, they'll give you all the information. For me, I feel, because of having the background in the coaching, I know how hard it is to change our behaviors, right? To change our habits, even our habits of thinking.
Yeah.
And again, the example I gave earlier, if you were raised by parents who valued perfectionism and who taught you that mistakes are wrong, and you're actually a pioneer who's meant to make mistakes regularly in life, just having that information that you're a pioneer, you're not going to be able to be like, okay, now I can make mistakes, right?
Yes.
You're going to slide back into your patterns that you've been running with for 30 or 40 or 50 years. And so the coaching and the meeting every week to discuss that, it has someone else who's outside of the picture looking at your brain. It's always harder to look at our own brain. Someone outside the picture that is like, did you fall back into these habits here? Do you remember what we talked about? And then, and it happens with me too, right? I connect with it, particularly through my certifications, other human design people, and they remind me of parts of my design. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. I forgot. Mm-hmm. So there is so much value in the consistency of it, at least over, a period of time where you feel like, okay, I've started to create these new neural pathways. I've started to create these new habits and new practices. And I can at least have the awareness for myself when I've gone back to my old ways.
Yes, absolutely. And so that brings up for me, tell me a little bit more about the container that you offer to students, as of the time of this recording, because of course, as we grow and change, obviously some things could change, but at the time of this recording in 2023, early 2023, how can people work with you? How can they find you? What does it look like?
So I'm working with people one-on-one, and I am doing a deep dive into their design. So we're, doing it with the client and me. We meet every week. I meet over 12 sessions, and that gives us that time to establish those new habits and patterns and to really develop the deep understanding. It also gives me time to dive deeper. So if I see a pattern of theirs showing up, going into the design to say, where is this coming from? And to some of those deeper levels of the design, sometimes I have to go searching for it. But when I find it and can bring it back to the client, it's always very impactful. Be like, oh, I get why this is happening now. Mm-hmm. Making it easier to shift or use it more resourcefully. So one-on-one over 12 sessions, always starting with getting to know you and your own independent design first. Some people choose to do another set of 12 sessions where we can dive deeper into how does my design influence how I'm meant to show up in business? How does my design impact my relationships? So, you could bring your best friend's chart or your spouse's chart, and we can do what's called a combination chart and say, oh, this is what the relationship looks like. This is where the challenge will likely come up. This is where you're really compatible. Or we can take a look at teams, whether it's, I actually, at this point, I only work with people who have a small team, so fewer than 10, because the energetics is different when you get with a large team. But once you have that basis of knowing yourself, there's so many different things that we can cover. Some people only ever do the 12 and they're like, okay, I know me and that's good enough, right? With their design. And then other people are like, no, let's keep going. There's so much more to learn. And I love that I work with both kinds of people.
That's great. And I know you have an open house coming up soon. So I want to let people know about that. So tell us about that coming up March 28th, right?
Tuesday evening, March 28th, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, because I'm in the Eastern time zone of the US. And it's just an open house. It's really casual. It started as something actually my clients asked for because they wanted to meet other people who were learning design, because most of them, they're the only one they know in their life who's doing design. Although most of my clients are trying to talk their friends or family into starting with it. And that was the other thing they were requesting, is a way that they could introduce their friends and family to it. So I said, okay, it will be for clients and they can invite people. And then I was like, well, if they're inviting new people, I might as well open it up to anybody. So anybody who is interested in design and wants to hear stories from my clients about, the experiences they've had since they've started the journey, both in terms of results they've created and maybe challenges that they've had along the way. If you want to know more about your design, you can go to the website and create a free chart and bring it with you. I'm going to leave a lot of room for Q&A. And in my mind, it's a bunch of people who are interested in the topic getting together to geek out about design, which is like my idea of the perfect evening.
I love it. Well,
I'm such a nerd about it.
I unfortunately won't be able to attend, but I want to extend this invitation out to all of you who are listening. I think it's a really powerful addition to your arsenal as a business owner to understand your human design and start that journey. Just for so many of the reasons that we've talked about today, we'll put the link to get to Stacy in there in the show notes, the contact information, as well as the link to register for the evening and the link to get that free human design chart for yourself so that you can start that process. So that'll all go in the show notes for all of you. Is there anything else before we wrap up today that you just want to share with our audience about human design or marketing business or any of that?
I'd like to share for marketing and business, whether you're starting out or you've been in it a few years, the result that I like to see people get from human design is that they go back to trusting themselves, that they go back to being that expert for themselves, and they can take all of the advice of all the different experts that they hear, but filter it through their own knowing. And so if things aren't working out, because look, we've all signed up for programs and, webinars and read books and all these things and been like, why am I not getting the results that other people are getting? We've almost all had that experience. They're the people who have the astronomical results, and then, there's us. And it's so easy to blame yourself in that situation, to think that you're doing it wrong, to become the disciplinarian with yourself and just bully yourself into trying harder. Mm-hmm. And instead, I would like to see everyone offer themselves compassion and to go back to finding that trust. I really think, and it will make me teary-eyed, but I think that the way to change the world for the better, one of the ways is that if everyone understood themselves and had such a deep self-trust in themselves and could release judgment for themselves and others, what a peaceful and magnificent world that we would live in. And that's what human design is about. It's about us understanding and celebrating our differences and our uniqueness and how all of our differences can enrich us as a whole. Mm-hmm. So yeah. That's what I'd like to see for people.
Beautiful. And I can attest to the fact that you are helping me do that. I didn't know that I was a judgy person until we got into our work together. There's a little judgy girl in there.
We all have her in there, believe me, or him or her or they. Yeah, we all have it.
We all have it. But this has been fantastic. I'm so happy and I so appreciate you being here with us on Staging Sips. And to all of you out there in my Staging Sips community, I hope you have a wicked good week. I hope you enjoyed this sip, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the Staging Sips podcast. If you love what you've learned here today and you want to learn more about how to market and grow your staging business more strategically, I would love to see you join us inside of the Rethink You mentorship program. If you want more details and get on our waiting list, you can go to rethinkhomeinteriors.com/waitlist. Looking forward to seeing you in the classroom.